So this video is designed to help you kind of brainstorm your contextual analysis and possibly spin your seed article into what you could end up using for this as well. So the big challenge for this assignment is generally the brainstorming section that we're in right now. What are you going to write about? So, I clearly understand that it's a very open-ended assignment. You can write about just about anything as long as it fits some specific criteria, so we'll go over in just a second right now. Pretty much anything is game. So how do you narrow it? How do you figure it out? I said in the videos from last week that the idea often is you are looking for something that you genuinely don't know what the answer is. The point of research is to figure something out. If you're generally kind of walking into it with already kind of predetermined ideas and opinions and kind of know what the answer is, there's not really a whole lot of point in doing it. That's the other reason why we're doing a contextual analysis. So this is the kind of three things that as you're doing this paper, you need to kind of keep it in mind. And this is kind of what I often refer to as the criteria for excellence. So your inquiry question needs to not be a yes or no answer. So if it literally is like, yes, we should do this, or no, we shouldn't do this right here, that ends up being a argument base. And so ours is a inquiry-based question. So it's not thesis-driven, but inquiry question-driven. It should have shades of gray. It should be tricky. Okay, I'm not sure if this is the right answer. Is that the right answer as well? It needs to have at minimum 3 interested audiences. And when I say interested audiences, a lot of times I mean this by would divide a competent audience. So if you talk to people who knew about this subject, they would be fairly split. They'd be like, well, this could be the answer, or this could be the answer, or this could be the answer, or this could be the answer. It's not like these people know something about the topic and kind of realize the nuances in it. And remember, at minimum, there got to be 3. And you also need to present this from a neutral perspective. And this, I will tell you, is literally the hardest part about this assignment. Part of the reason why we do a contextual analysis as opposed to an argument paper is because people are really good at arguing. Like, oh yeah, I can do this. And you take a position and then you just support it. But the point of the contextual analysis is to understand the perspective of the interested audience. So even if you don't agree with the perspective, you do still need to be able to kind of understand and argue why they feel that way. Aristotle, when he's talking about the rhetorical triangle, and he's talking about pathos, the idea of kind of emotional stances, he'll end up saying that you have to understand your audience to be able to affect them. So this is what we're trying to do here as well. So the point of this video is I'm going to kind of take you through a contextual analysis that I kind of ran into last spring. And it was same thing, reading the New York Times, doing it in a WRD 104 class. And I saw this, and we ended up kind of, as a class, kind of working through this process. And there are a couple of different ways you could go with this. And the engine that would work for one would probably work for another. I'll show you kind of 2 possible models you could end up doing with this. And it often starts with a fairly innocuous place. It's not something that's not like, oh yeah, well this is totally an argument. It is. So in this case, there was an article in the New York Times last spring talking about the New York Yankees and the Flyers will stop playing a Kate Smith song after discovering kind of racist songs in her background. So the song itself is God Bless America. And for the Yankees, it was a staple of the 7th inning stretch since 2001. For the Philadelphia Flyers, it was even tighter. Kate Smith served as a mascot for the games in the 1970s Stanley Cup winners. There was literally a statue of her out front of it. So if you're not familiar with the song itself, you'll recognize it just. God bless America, and that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with an eye. So, totally, I can literally think of baseball games. I'm pretty sure I've been to White Sox games where they play this on Sundays, kind of right during the 7th inning stretch as well. So it's a fairly, standard part of the fabric of kind of our day-to-day world. If you're a sporting fan, you go to a bunch of baseball games, things like this, you go to a Flyers game, you're going to have heard this. You'll have heard this somewhere along the way. So where things get tricky is it turns out that Kate Smith, who was a singer in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, died in, I think it was 86 and things like this. But in the 1930s, she sang a number of songs that were problematic in how they talked about black people in the United States. And they had particularly offensive names, and I should kind of give warning for people. We're going to look at some images that are kind of problematic. We're going to look at some words, things that are also kind of problematic in how their presentation. But this is kind of like the nature of the elements we're looking at. So picking any heaven, why darkies are born. So these are kind of disturbing lyrics that are meant to demean black people as well. So there ends up being a reaction to this, where all of a sudden the Yankees and the Flyers make a decision to kind of go ahead and pull, they will no longer do this as well. So this ends up kind of starting up this kind of idea about, well, okay, so is this the right reaction to this as well? There literally is like a statue of Kate Smith out in front of the Phillies stadium as well. And we start seeing kind of like the historical kind of background to it as well. So the idea that it was played as a replacement of the national anthem at big games, bring the team good luck. So there's this kind of heritage, there's this kind of tradition associated with it as well. The songs themselves, problematic and what their lyrics are saying and things like this as well. But there is also this idea that, you know, they speak to this director of School of Music at the University of Illinois, kind of reflect the racial attitudes embedded into the cultural fabric of Smith's era as well. So to shape pop music, this country necessarily implicates musicians and songwriters in the history of racist exchange, impersonations, and appropriation as well. So she's a huge part of this. So this is the thing that we kind of encountered in class. And so we start talking about this. It's like, okay, well, so what do we make about this? And this is just literally our discussion. And one of the things that ended up making me think about was that at Christmas time the year before, that year, I had been home visiting my family, and we had been, you know, trying to figure out what you're going to do on Christmas Eve. You know, got family, we're cooking the next day and things like this. So we decide to watch a movie on Turner Movie Classic, and it's Holiday Inn. It's a Bing Crosby film, things like this. And again,
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used.
So again, this is very much part of our culture. Very much, you know, this is a song that every Christmas you hear 1,000 times as you're walking through, shopping malls and things like that as well. It's very much, it is literally, if we're thinking about it as kind of art, that was a movie that was created, the same way that Kate Smith is an artist, making songs, singing them, and things of that nature as well. So this is a piece of kind of, I guess you would end up saying pop art. It might be fine art, depends. Bing Crosby was a very famous singer and things like that. When we were watching the film, however, and I had never seen the entire film. I'd seen clips and things like this before. So we start, and this is, again, I want to warn everyone, this is very problematic as well. So there is a scene within the film that we're watching it along, and lo and behold, Crosby comes out in blackface, having problematic kind of stereotypes of African Americans, and then proceeds to sing an entire song for it. The band is in blackface as well. So that then, and this is just embedded into literally the film itself, you know, right along with, next to, you know, White Christmas, we have this super problematic representation of black people. And the other thing about it is, like, if you go to the, like the Turner Movie Classic shop, you can buy it for $13. You can have it right here. And down in the description, there is no type of kind of, you know, notation about it or problematic. Oh, it's got Happy Holiday, Easter Parade, Song of Freedom, things like this. But no, necessarily, there's no disclaimer or warning or any notion about this as well. Now, again, so this is also in part of where we're having this conversation last spring as well, is in the fact that after, and this is another article, there's a link to this in that I've left as well. So it turns out that the governor of Virginia, when he was in school, ends up his annual ends up having a picture of someone in a Ku Klux Klan outfit and blackface as well. And so there ends up being this kind of conversation that starts up about this, where it says, and at the time, I believe it is, so former Fox and NBC host Megyn Kelly personified the national ignorance of this last fall when she insisted that blackface Halloween costumes were all in good fun. And derided dissidents as kind of costume polices as well. So that all of a sudden, kind of this question of like, okay, no, but it is that, and this article goes through in great detail about how blackface feeds into white supremacy as well. So that these are not just kind of like images that are kind of like, oh, they're part of the past. They're problematic pieces of history that were done for a specific reason. So that then that's where we start kind of building this potential for a, inquiry question for contextual analysis. So what do you do with problematic art? Something like this. What do you do with the songs of Kate Smith? Do you just ignore it? Do you take care of it? Do you remove it, censor it? Things of that nature as well. And so that possibly then that might be something like an inquiry question. So you have a seed article, say the Kate Smith article that would end up kind of jumping this off as well. Potential audiences for this, and what different people would end up feeling. So one of the perspectives is the material is racist and just should not be viewed. And, it should ultimately just be censored out. It should not be there. But another perspective might be that the material is part of our history and should be looked at through the lens of the time that it's created. So it ends up being kind of a historic perspective. Now, there is this other kind of idea that I've always watched Holiday Inn, so that it's part of a tradition. I'm not saying that I do it, but people could end up saying that. This is part of a tradition of Christmas time as well. So there might be heritage as part of this perspective of this interested audience. And then, but maybe there is some kind of mediated position as well. So maybe it ends up being the material shouldn't be censored, but it could be explained to it needs to be explained in terms of context. So it may end up being a teachable moment. Now, we're talking about it in the perspective here of kind of art when we're talking about either music or film. But there is, a lot of times we'll see something that a phenomenon is in one area that it might be in another area as well. So, for example, I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. And outside of the city, there is a giant mountain there called Stone Mountain. It's not the most exciting name in the world. And after, let's scroll down a little bit. There has been a hue and cry about whether or not Confederate monuments should be taken down. A lot of this has to do after Charlottesville, where a person was killed during riots. That all of a sudden people became very, very interested in whether or not, what should we do with Confederate monuments. And if you read this article, there's a link to it as well, is that there's kind of embedded the art, kind of the perspectives that we see. So the idea here should be removed in a year-long process, blowing it off piece by piece. And if you literally have never seen it before, it's this giant engraving on the side of the mountain of Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, I can't forget, I think who's the other one? The president of the Confederacy as well. It's all on there as well. Other perspectives in there as well. Oh, that it's also ends up being the carving is explicitly protected by state laws as the centerpiece of Georgia's most visited tourist attraction. There are other perspectives we've seen as well. Oh, the familiar refrain that Confederate monuments are solely about heritage remains a popular one. This is part of our culture. This is why we would want to keep this as well. But then we then find out that it's also part of this racist background. So it was hatched in the 1940s as part of the Ku Klux Klan, and then came back into prominence in the 1950s as well. There is like an interesting chart right here if you're charting kind of Confederate monuments. The 1910s and 20s, they see a big spike in them as well, and then also in the 1960s with a reaction to the Civil Rights Movement. All right, I hope this was helpful.